Now may I invite the venerable journalist, Mr. Mark Tully, on stage, and talking to him about stories from inside India will be Ms. Bamzai. So big round of applause for both of them. We all know he has reported on India and South Asia for a world audience for over 30 years. And as an author, the former BBC journalist has written several fascinating books on the social and cultural fabric of India. He uses his vast experience to write about characters and weave stories around them. We're privileged to have him here. And yes, over to you, Ms. Bamzai, for this wonderful session.
I was just asking, should we call him Tully Saab? Should we call him Sir Mark? Should we call him Sir Tully, as a lot of Indians call you?
Not Sir Tully.
Or just Mark?
Mark, yes.
I think Sir Mark has been a witness to history for almost 50 years now, 45, I think, in India. He's been in India off and on since 1965. He was born here, and he's witnessed assassinations, riots. He's been expelled from India. His home has been picketed. There have been protests outside his house. I think he's seen it all. I want to just take you back quickly to the emergency, because I was just watching this old video of, not so old video of yours, recounting how you were threatened by Mrs. Gandhi's strongman, Muhammad Yunus, who said that, well, I'll let you say what he said very colorfully. And you were essentially asked to leave because things were made so difficult for you. So you want to just talk a little about that story?
Yes, well, when it was apparent, it was the day the emergency was declared. And this is a story told by Indra Gujarat. Indra, of course, went on to be Prime Minister of India. And he told me this story, and it's all written down in a book I wrote. He said that Muhammad Yunus called him in. Muhammad Yunus was a person who was very, very close to Indira Gandhi, a member of her kitchen cabinet, very, very close to her. And he said to Gujarat, he said, you get hold of Mark Tully, take his trousers down, give him a good beating, and then put him in prison. And Gujarat said, well, what on earth are you talking about? He said that Mark Tully has said that Jagjeevan Ram has resigned. Now, Jagjeevan Ram was then a very leading member of Mrs. Gandhi's cabinet. And of course, it was important that Mrs. Gandhi's cabinet should have stayed together when the emergency was declared. Gujarat went and checked with the All India Radio monitoring, and he found that Mark Tully had never said this. So he came back and he went direct to Mrs. Gandhi rather than going to Yunus. And he told Mrs. Gandhi what Yunus had said. And then he said, but I can't do this. A, because it's the Home Minister's job to do this sort of thing. And B, because
take your trousers down and beat you? No.
Well, apparently he thought it was. But also, he hasn't said it. So I was spared in that way. Otherwise, I could have been in jail.
Yeah, well, narrow escape. Have things changed? We hear a lot of criticism about the BBC's coverage of Kashmir. Suddenly, there's been talk of that video footage that was supposed to be fake, but it turned out perhaps that it's real. There's a lot of that foreign hand kind of criticism again, which seems to echo Mrs. Gandhi. Do you sense that?
Yes, I think it is very reminiscent in ways of my time. We were quite often accused of trying to destabilize India. And my answer to that was, my answer to today would be, if India is in such a feeble or such an unstable state that the BBC can destabilizing it, then India is in a pretty poor state. I didn't believe then it was, and so I would go on to say that actually the politicians who make these sort of allegations are demeaning India.
Yes.
And I would say the same today.
Right. In these 45 years, you've said India has been not a failing state, but a flailing state. What do you mean?
Well, that's actually said by a World Bank economist. What I mean is this, that the Indian government, the Indian administrative system, has not been able to deliver on the ground. That's why I have written and spoken about what I think is one of the fundamental problems of India, which is bad governance, inefficient governance, corrupt governance, governance that does not deliver. And if you look at the United Nations Human Development figures, you find that a country like, I wrote this only the other week, you find that a country like Bangladesh has some better indices that India does. And I can remember in 1971 to 75, at the time Sheikh Mujib was in power, and I can remember that Bangladesh was basically a broken country, broken by the civil war. Now, if a country like Bangladesh can come up like that, why can't India? I believe it is because it's a flailing state and because the standard of governance, the standard of delivery by the government, particularly at the grassroots level, is so inefficient and ineffective.
How much do you blame the politicians?
I blame them a lot because I think that they should have reformed the administrative system. After all, we all know, and it's written time and time again, that this administrative system, and particularly this police system, who are so important in efficient or in the delivery of services, was bequeathed by the British. And it is a British Raj system. It's not an independent Indian system.
And you feel that we've not really done much to change it?
Yes, I do feel that, yes.
So how much of what you see now reminds you of the emergency? How difficult was it to report during the emergency? And yet, when Mrs. Gandhi died, Rajiv Gandhi is said to have asked whether the BBC had confirmed it. So they loved you and hated you in equal measure. And they were so particular about the image of India during the emergency. You want to talk about some of the, apart from the beating story, some of the strange things that happened to you during that time?
Well, I do remember one rather entertaining thing which happened. I was called in by V.C. Shukla.
We must explain to this generation who V.C. Shukla was.
Yes, who was?
He was, yes.
So you explain.
Well, he was the Information and Broadcasting Minister, and for me, he will always be remembered as the man who loved candy, right? There was this starlet Candy, who apparently he was very besotted by. I remember that, and he was very glamour-struck, wasn't he?
Yes, but he was also a very stupid information minister. And
I think we can applaud on that. He really was stupid. He was a very smart politician, but a very stupid minister.
Yes, I remember once he called me in and he said, how dare you break the censorship rules and report that a bomb has gone off in All India Radio in Bhopal. So I said to him, Shukla ji, thank you very much for giving this information. I'll now go and broadcast it. And
so much
the sort
for
of
that.
sad things which happened, you know.
Right. Did you ever, how often did you meet Mrs. Gandhi? Did you ever have long conversations with her? How was she personally with you?
Varied. She was very moody. I met her many times. You know, she was much more generous with her time than modern politicians are today. The last time I met her, actually, it was quite fascinating because after the interview was over, this was just before the Commonwealth Summit in Delhi, she said, well, switch your tape recorder off and let's discuss what's happening in India. So I had to talk with her about what was happening in India. But I must tell you one lovely time when I took a Director General of the BBC to meet Indira Gandhi. And this was the time when Indira Gandhi had returned to power. And the Director General said to her, and he had been a political journalist, so he asked her a political question. And he said, Mrs. Gandhi, or Prime Minister, how did you feel when you lost the people's support? And she said, with a lovely smile, very gently, Mr. Trathawan, I never lost the people's support. They were only misled by rumors, many of them spread by the BBC. So she could be charming, and she could be very off-putting indeed.
Have you met the new generation of leaders in the BJP and the Congress, the current Prime Minister?
No. I don't have a relationship with the present Prime Minister. After all, I'm not doing that sort of journalism.
But you had a very long relationship with Mr. Advani.
Yes, I have a very long relationship with Advani ji. I still go and see him sometime. I have a quotation from him, important quotation from him in one of the books I've written. I have a relationship with Joshi ji as well, Murli Manohar Joshi. I was at a book launch and he said, I'm so happy to see my old friend Mark Tully here, which was very nice for me. Yes, I do indeed, and I've met Rajnath Singh and some of the more junior ones, of course, I've met.
It's interesting, I read somewhere that you said that the BJP wanted a Congress Mocked Bharat, but it's also got a BJP Mocked Bharat. You want to explain that?
Yes, well, I said this during this election. I said that Amit Shah wants a Congress Mocked Bharat. Well, he might, who knows, he might well have achieved that, but he's also achieved a BJP Mocked Bharat because during the election there was absolutely no mention of the BJP. It was all Modi, 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 and nothing else but Modi. So that's what I meant by saying we have a BJP Mocked Bharat as well.
You've been accused of being soft on Hindutva as well, right? Some of your critics.
I've been accused of many things.
But you've also said that you disagree with the Congress brand of secularism.
Yes, this is a long and complicated thing, but yes, I have said that, and I have written it. Only that day I was in Goa, and someone read a passage from a book I wrote more than 20 years ago now, called No Full Stops in India, where I explained what I meant. But putting it very simply, what I mean is that I think that secularism carries tones of hostility to religion or indifference to religion. Well, I don't think India is hostile to religion, and I don't think India is indifferent to religion. And I therefore think that in some way or other, religion has to be accommodated in the public life and in India.
It's always said that whenever someone from BBC goes anywhere in India, he's mistaken for Mark Tully. Is that true?
Well, it is sometimes true.
Have you heard stories from various people who come back and tell you, I was mistaken for Mark Tully again?
I remember one quite nice story. I've had lots of stories like that, but I remember the nicest one I heard was there was a very leading television presenter rather, and interviewer.
You have to tell us his name.
Jeremy Paxman.
Oh, really? God.
He came to India and he was talking to, he heard rather the fixer when he was out in the field talking to someone, villager, and the villager mentioned the name Mark Tully. And so Jeremy Paxman got very cross and said, well, tell him I am not Mark Tully, but I am much more famous than Mark Tully is. So,
but that kind of fame, you know, was also a function of the fact that we didn't have a free media. I mean, not to take away from all the work that you did.
No, you're absolutely right. Absolutely.
But there is,
100%
do you
right.
sometimes turn on the television? If you do, and do you sometimes think that there's too much noise, and where is the reportage when you watch our 300, 800 news channels?
Yes, absolutely. I turn on the television and I wonder, where is the craft? The skill is no longer there. And where is the journalistic training? Why do journalists go on and on speaking the same thing time and time again? Where is the camera skills now? Yes, I do really believe that in Indian television there has been a decline in quality.
What about the newspapers? What about print? Do you feel that they're holding governance and the government accountable? Do you feel there is a sense of, is it fear? Is it an internal kind of code of censorship or conduct?
Well, you know, in Britain, for instance, you have papers which are pro-government and papers which are anti-government.
And you know what to expect.
But you do know what they stand for, and you know that it's been a free decision of them to decide this is their policy. And the Daily Mail is right-wing conservative. And if you'd read The Guardian the week before Boris Johnson was finally chosen, well, you'd have thought this man is thoroughly unsuitable to be the mayor of the sarpanch of a village, leave aside Prime Minister of the country. But you know, you do hear from your colleagues in the media that pressure is put on the papers by the government, and pressure was put on television networks by the government too. But I think there is, but also we have to give credit to the fact that there are media, print, digital, very important nowadays, and television channels who are resisting that pressure. So it's not like the emergency when the government just put a total blank on it virtually.
Some of the more interesting stories that you've told is, one among them is actually asking Morarji Desai whether he drank his own urine, and he actually answered you. You want to tell that story and maybe a couple of more? Because you are India's storyteller, you know.
Yes, well, you know, the first thing I have to say is rather a vulgar thing, if you don't mind me saying it.
No, we're all for it.
When I first went to the External Affairs Ministry spokesman and said, I want to make a film about Morarji Desai, the spokesman said to him, I'm not going to have you taking the piss out of my Prime Minister.
Truly.
Yes. But then he relented, and I took this. I asked Mirage this question, and Mirage asked me how he looked. And I said, well, you look very well. And you know, Mirage had very sort of translucent skin, and he was wearing immaculate white khadi and dressed beautifully. And I said, well, you look rather better than I do, actually.
And he was 82.
And he was 82, yes. And I said, you look rather better than I do. And he laughed and said, you see, there you are. I told you, it's good for you to drink your urine. And then he added, you know, I wrote a book about it. Not many people bought it, but now I'm Prime Minister. More people are buying it, he said.
In today's day, it would be a bestseller, I think.
Yes.
There are a lot of people who drink their own urine. Do you have any such stories of Advani? Because he is a complex character, and now to see him, well, a shadow of his former self, I think. What do you think? He's quite a charming man.
You know, I'll tell you two stories about Advani. One was when I gave a lecture, and Advani was on the platform as well, and I talked about my views on secularism, and Advani said, I thought he would then criticize me, because I said, to me, Hinduism did not mean Hindutva. And Advani said, well, I can't really see anything to criticize in Mark Tully. Said it is a point of view, and we have to accept it's a point of view. The other time, when I went to see Advani, and I said to him that one of the things which appalled me at Ayodhya was the terrible, was the obscene anti-Muslim slogans being shouted. And Advani just said to me, well, you see, that's the impact of pseudo-secularism. Another thing he said, which I can't, no, I better not, that's about it.
No. Now you have to. You can't tease us like this.
No, it's unfair, actually, because it'll get...
But I hope all of you know that Mark Tully has always been close to the action. He was there in Ayodhya the day the demolition happened.
Yes.
And that was a scary story for you as well. You want to tell people a little about that?
Well, it was a scary story because I was, when I got back to Ayodhya after filing my story, say the destruction of the mosque had started, I was surrounded by car sevaks, and the discussion started, and some said, isko maro, and others said, ne, wo mashhoor aadmi hai, agar hum usko marenge to hamara badnaam honge. And eventually a compromise was reached, and they said, so usko band karo. So I was taken and locked up in the room of a dharamsala. And then I have to say that the Indian journalists I'd come back into Ayodhya with refused to go away. And so the car sevak said, well, if you won't go away, we told you, we have nothing against you. When the car sevaks said that, the Indian journalists refused to go away, so the car sevaks said, right, we'll lock you up as well. And I was rescued by the mahant of a nearby temple, who sent his man to tell these people, you can't behave like that, and escort us back into the mahant's temple.
You had a scary escape during the riots as well, the 1984 riots from your own home?
Yes, we had demonstrations outside our house for a whole week.
What was the cause?
Actually, it was before the actual riots.
After Mrs. Gandhi had been assassinated?
It was after Blue Star, because after Blue Star, someone in India, a man called Jagjit Singh Chauhan, someone in England, sorry, had said, Mrs. Gandhi will be killed.
Ah, yes.
So we had these demonstrations.
Mrs. Thatcher had written, that was much later. Mrs. Thatcher wrote about it to the BBC. She complained about them showing Jagjit Singh Chauhan, right?
Yes, I think she did correct. Right. Yeah,
Sorry to interrupt. Please go on. Yeah.
Jagjit Singh Chauhan, in an interview,
Yeah.
had said that Mrs. Gandhi would be killed. And that is true, but it was an interview. It was not the BBC itself saying it. And we had these demonstrations for a whole week. And the final demonstration, they got into the garden and broke the windows and got into the house and all the rest of it. And I have to tell you, in standard way, we called the police. The police came, said they were conducting an investigation. We never heard anything from them again.
What is it that you love so much about India? I think if they ever open your heart, it'll have India written all over it. What is it that you love so much?
Well,
there's so much to dislike, and yet there's so much to love.
There's a funny reason. One reason is that I'm a great believer in fate. I believe in life is 90% fate, 10% what you do with it. And it's been my fate to live in India because three times I should have left. Once after my first posting, I did leave. Then I came back. And once after the emergency, and then I came back. And then again, towards the end of my career, I was told I'd been here too long and I should leave, and I didn't leave. So it seemed to me my fate, and there's nothing surprising in this to me, because my family had lived in India, parts of my family, for so many years, and right back to the middle of the 19th century. So I think it's fate, primarily. But of course I have an affection for India. I have an admiration for parts of Indian culture, and I have an enormous number of friends. And above all, I've been treated with huge respect and huge affection. And you see, everyone here is evidence of that. So I'm enormously
I think we can all
grateful
applaud
for
ourselves
that.
and Sir Mark. And given what's happening in Britain with Brexit, perhaps you're better off here.
Oh, definitely.
I would choose Mr. Modi over Boris Johnson anytime. What about you?
I don't say. I'm tempted to say I won't choose neither.
Yes, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so very much. It was such a pleasure to talk to you. And I would urge all of you to read all his books. They're just fantastic. Or just go on YouTube and listen to him speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tully. Can we have a huge round of applause for him as I request Mr. Chawla to also come on stage and present a memento to him as a token of appreciation.